I guess I've got a few questions here. I've got PolyMet's 2012 annual report here. I've been going through that, and it's interesting. It's some really interesting reading. I'd encourage people to take a look at it. But one thing, I'm looking at your balance sheet, and we're talking about financial assurance. You show assets of $236 million at the end of 2012, and you haven't got 2013 report filed, which would be interesting taking a look at that. But essentially, there's about $9.7 million in cash or cash equivalents, and then the rest of it, your assets are mineral property, plant, and equipment, and that's about $220 million. And I'm trying to understand what those assets entail. I mean, could you explain, where that $220 million value comes from?
Mr. Chair, Representative Falk, I'm the environmental permitting individual, so the details on the finances, I do not know. I can say this much, however, as a publicly traded company, our finances are open to the public in terms of the annual reports, et cetera. And if there's a specific list of questions that you have in terms of aspects of the finances, we'd like to have them, and we can certainly get back to you with detail in each one with someone that's an expert in that area.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And I was, hoping that an executive vice president would know a little bit about the financials, but I was looking at just some of the summary of significant accounting policies, and reading through here, it says that non-financial assets, including mineral property, plant, equipment, and wetland credit intangibles, are reviewed at each reporting date to determine whether there is any indication of impairment. If any such indication exists, the asset's recoverable amount is estimated at the greater of its value in use and its fair value less cost to sell. And that, to me, that doesn't say that you're actually marking to market. If you actually had to go and liquidate things immediately, you might not get the full value that's shown on your balance sheet. And I'm not saying that there's, that this is done incorrectly, but it just, looking through this, I've got some concerns. And one of the reasons why I also looked at that is on your liability side, you've got, it's $51.68 million for environmental rehabilitation and provision. And basically, that, as I'm reading in here too, that's been calculated as the cost from the Cliffs acquisition plus potentially what it could cost to go and operate any remediation efforts of this facility. At least the company estimating that at about $52 million, let's just say. And it says that costs incurred to get an asset ready for use, i.e. that $31 million that was brought over from the Cliffs acquisition, is put into the asset base of the property, plant, and equipment. And so basically, as I understand this, you've capitalized debt as an asset because that asset isn't producing yet. And so it seems like your balance sheet is inflated with liabilities and not real assets. And that's just, I'm trying to understand the figures here. So, could you comment to that a little bit? What is the true value of assets? If you had to go and sell these things immediately, are they marked to market?
As I indicated earlier, we have our controller and chief financial officer that can respond to those questions. But as a publicly traded company, we're audited independently by auditors, and they go through the balance sheets to make sure that they're accurate and meet all state and federal rules, both in the U.S. and in Canada. But again, of the specific questions, if you give those to me, I'm more than happy to get back to you with a response.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess I've got a number of questions just going through the statements here. But, I think that one of the things that Representative Kahn had asked about was how long the plan would be, and that's one of the things a number of people have asked questions about. But this is exactly from point 7 here. This is the 4th paragraph down, and I'll read it here. That talks about the company uses the best estimates possible. The company's best estimate of environmental rehabilitation provision at January 31st, 2013 was $53.5 million. Based on estimated cash flows required to settle this obligation and present-day costs of $24.5 million. And that includes the $23.9 million for Cliffs 1, $33 million for Cliffs 2. And they say an annual inflation rate of 2%, a risk-free rate of 2.79%, and a mine life of 20 years and a rehabilitation period of 10 years. So is it the company's position that you're only going to require to do rehabilitation for 10 years?
Madam Chair, Representative Falk, no, the reclamation plans and et cetera will go on for much longer than 10 years. For example, the filling of the West Pit will go for about 40 years. So I'd have to look at that specific language, talk to our financial people to see what that refers to. And as I indicated earlier in my testimony, those kinds of questions, I'm happy to get back to you with people that have specific knowledge of how it was written.
Well, thank you, but I mean, if your annual report from 2012 says your rehabilitation period is 10 years, and you're saying it's something different, which one's accurate? Which one's correct?
As I indicated in my...
This is what you filed with the regulators, so I'm just trying to understand.
Madam Chair, Representative Falk, the issue is in terms of rehabilitation and what it refers to, and that's what I would need to check with our financial people.
Well, Madam Chair, and I know this isn't a hearing on financial assurance, and so I would have hoped that somebody could answer kind of basic financial questions. I mean, this is everything that's been filed is right in their report here. I've got a question too. I know that the issue's been raised that PolyMet's owned by Glencore, or is a shell company of Glencore. Is that a what structure does Glencore have with PolyMet?
Madam Chair, Representative, Glencore is an investor, a minority investor. They have about under 30% of the investment in the company. It's not a joint venture, and it is not a parent company, or we are not a shell company.
Well, there's a whole section about Glencore financing in your consolidated statements, and this is in Section 10, Glencore financing, and reading in the first paragraph here, dating back to October 31st, 2008, PolyMet agreed to propose and shareholders approve the election of Glencore senior executive as a director, also appointed a senior member of Glencore's technical team to PolyMet's technical steering committee. As a result of the series of financing transactions and the purchase by Glencore of PolyMet common shares previously owned by Cliffs, Glencore's current and potential ownership of PolyMet comprises, it goes through in a list if you count just the common shares at the time, 25.6% ownership, but if you go and look at all the warrants and obligations here, it says it represents 34.9% on a partially diluted basis, and you take full dilution, it's 32.4%. But as you get further into here, the shareholder rights section, as I understand it, if an entity owns more than 20%, basically the other shareholders waive their rights, and the Glencore's got right of first refusal to acquire the entity as a whole. Is that not accurate?
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, Representative.
I'd like to, Madam Chair, it would be helpful if Representative Falk would then, at the end of each of his diatribes, state that he wants to know how that would affect his financial assurances. Because we're just going on and on, Madam Chair, about this financial statement that they are not here to be able to validate.
Madam Chair, on that particular question, like the others, if the representative has the questions, we're happy to answer them with people with expertise there. If you'd be willing, please send those questions to me, and we'll have responses to them.
Well, Madam Chair and to Representative Dill, I mean, this is financial assurance. If the company is going to put up any assets or put any cash in, and they have no assets to back up, you know, I'm looking to see cash here, and I see about $9.7 million in cash here. And if there's no tangible value, if there's no fungible value of the rest of the assets, then what is it? And another question I had is, with this value of environmental remediation, it's on the liability side, it's $53 million. That was capitalized as an asset, on the property, plant, and equipment. It says right in here. So is there cash, or is that just a number that we looked at to say this is what the liability is, and we're going to go and capitalize that, meaning that it's just materialized? Is there cash to back it up? Are there cash equivalents to justify that liability?
Madam Chair, Representative, I look forward to getting your list of questions so we can respond to those.
Well, I see this as, I mean, I wish somebody would have been here that could actually talk about the finances, being that this is a hearing about financial assurance. And
Madam Chair, Representative, the reason that those people aren't here is because the financial assurance piece comes in the permitting phase. And in that permitting phase, when we come up with a proposal, the books have to be open relative to how it's going to be funded, the kind of instruments, where the money comes from, et cetera. And that comes later in the process.
Well, I mean, once again, I would just encourage people to go through this because there's a lot of questions here, and the assertion's been made that this is just a shell company, and I'm kind of inclined to believe that because I can't see real value here. And I want to know, so take this back, whether or not Glencore has the ability to purchase this entity outright on a right of first refusal basis. That should be a very simple question to answer.
Madam Chair and Representative, in order to answer that correctly, I'll work with our financial people. Let me know if you'd like a list of questions, as I've indicated earlier.
I think you've already received the list of questions, and it would be good to hear back from them. Any other questions?
Madam Chair, one thing
yes.
too. I just to also bring back, because I under the last section here, we're looking about contingencies and commitments, and there's different types of risks that are listed by the company: currency risk, liquidity risk, credit risk, interest rate risk. There isn't a single section for environmental risk, and I would hope that, being that we're talking about the potential cost to the state of Minnesota, whether it's for water quality issues, that the company would at least acknowledge that there's an environmental risk to mining. I mean, if you're not even going to acknowledge it in your annual report, I just kind of question where the priorities are.
Madam Chair, Representative, the environmental risk is included in the permitting discussions, as I indicated earlier.